came this close to being murdered while camping, so kinda long-winded, so I'll try to shorten it. I'm now 25, and at the time I was 16 or 17. My then boyfriend, and two of our other friends decided to go camping in a small patch of woods next to a neighborhood that was being developed, and the small patch of woods was roughly 900 feet across both ways. On the left side, if you were viewing it from the road, was the undeveloped neighborhood, no people living in the houses, they're mainly just wood and no windows/actual walls, and on the right side was about a mile-long driveway that led up to a house a little over a half-mile past the patch of woods. Pretty deserted, so we get our tent, fire pit, chairs, etc., set up, and we're relaxing as it starts to get dark, when we hear extremely loud screaming coming from a woman, maybe 400 to 500 feet away. At first there weren't any words we could make out, but then there was a help, and a no. And then the loudest, most terrifying scream was cut off mid-scream. We can't see through these trees, they're thick, it's getting darker. So we get the fuck out. Leave all our stuff behind. As we're walking back to the undeveloped neighborhood where we parked, keep in mind the screaming was coming from over that way of the woods, so we had to go out near the long driveway, to the road, around the tiny bit of woods, into the undeveloped neighborhood where we parked. I'm immediately on the phone with police who are trying to tell me it was just a cat in heat. From where we parked, we were facing the woods. A man comes out, dragging something in heavy sheets/cloth/something, spots us, and starts coming towards our car. The police pulled in right then, the man ran, and as it turned out, he had killed a woman about 400 feet from where we were camping. Don't know if he was ever caught, but let's not meet please. Boyfriend and I had frightening experience while camping. Last summer my boyfriend and I went camping in some nature preserve in Pennsylvania. I can't remember the name. It was pretty primitive camping. No cell service and we saw two other people there in the entire place. It was huge so it was pretty empty. My boyfriend pretty much immediately said these two people seemed off to him right away. I don't know if they had anything to do with what happened at night but I'll describe them. The first person was a woman who had her truck parked off the trail and the hood open. I don't really notice these types of things but my boyfriend said it looked to him like she was waiting for someone to pull off beside her and offer to help with her truck. Normally my boyfriend is the type to at least offer to call someone but he said she skeeved him out enough he didn't even want to draw her attention more than what's necessary. The next person we saw drove by several times while we were setting up. He just kept driving by slowly and looking at us. I didn't even notice though until my BF pointed out that he'd already done that twice. Whether these two people had anything sinister going on or not, the real story has to do with what woke us up at around 3 a.m. It was incredibly loud and sudden. I couldn't describe it or even compare it to anything but my boyfriend said it sounded to him similar to a chain gun revving up, or someone using some large tool to scrape gravel. My BF jumped up and looked out the little window of the tent. The sound happened again, and it was getting noticeably closer each time. I was about to piss myself but my BF told me it was probably miles off. I didn't question this because loud noises can be heard from miles off, right? Well, later my BF told me that because he didn't want to scare me. It really sounded like it was coming from right down the little dirt road. At one point he said he suspected it was right in front of our campsite. The only reason he didn't tell me to get out and dart for the car was because he was afraid it could be someone trying to scare us out of the tent for some dreadful reason. He whispered. I should have noticed he was whispering and knew something was wrong, since otherwise he'd just speak normally, right, for me to just go back to sleep. However, I could not because every little sound I heard outside sounded like someone sneaking up to the tent. Eventually my BF told me to get out and help him pack up. It was maybe 20 minutes after the sound stopped. He held our only weapon, a machete, in front of him. It was a full moon or close to it so we didn't need a light. While we were packing quickly I noticed an empty beer can close to our dead campfire. It wasn't there when we went to sleep at around 10 p.m. and neither of us even brought any beer. Thankfully we got out of there and for the rest of that trip. We either camped in areas well populated by other campers or we got a hotel room, so whoever or whatever that was, let's never meet. Camping hell. Back in 2011, I was within a circle of friends that made it a tradition to go camping at a certain spot every May long weekend. The spot we chose was in a beautiful area right on the edge of a large lake, and was located on government land. The lake itself had a dam on it, so during May long, the water levels were always low, if not completely empty, making it possible to walk across it. People were allowed to camp there as long as they weren't causing trouble or making a mess, and it was generally a good time for everyone. The spots themselves were spaced far enough apart that you had your own privacy, but not far enough that you couldn't meet other people. In this particular year, our spot was in the middle of a small hill, with one campsite below us and one above us. The first night of our trip happened without incident. During the second day, the people staying at the site below us had moved in. We didn't think much of it, and continued drinking throughout the day and into the night. At about around midnight, the people at the campsite below us were really out of control. They were yelling and screaming, and their music had gotten even louder, so our friend Ben went down to ask them to turn it down. He was promptly punched in the face, and he came back to inform us that he was 90% sure they were on drugs. After that, the vibe wasn't as relaxed and we were all somewhat on edge. I was feeling really tired, so I just decided to go to bed. Some of my friends were still awake, including Ben, and one couple, Lily and Derek, that were visiting another campsite we had made friends with that day. I could hear that the campsite below was still blasting their music and partying pretty hard, but I just tried to ignore it and go to sleep. I don't know what time it was when I was jolted awake. Parts of this are somewhat of a blur. All I know is that I sat straight up as soon as I heard the screaming and yelling coming from outside my tent. I quickly ran outside to find our campsite in chaos. One of my friends was clutching their chest, people were running around and screaming to call 911. I was quickly informed of what happened. Apparently, not long after I had gone to bed, the people camping at the site below us decided they weren't finished talking to Ben, and on their way up, they had encountered the Lily and Derek walking back. Now Derek and Ben are about the same height and have the same color hair, so they assumed that Derek was Ben and bottled both him and Lily over the head with a full glass bottle. I don't know if it was the same guys that showed up at our campsite, but I was told that everyone else was sitting around the fire when 2 or 3 huge guys appeared from the darkness and walked over to them. One had a paring knife and the other had a butcher's knife in their hands. Ben saw the knives and had gotten up to talk to them, and had barely spoken a word when the guy with the paring knife stabbed him once in the chest. At the same time, some people from the campsite above had seen the guys coming and came down to help. One of the guys, Tim, was coming down the hill when the guy with the butcher's knife ran up to him and stabbed him in the stomach. From there, sheer panic ensued. People called 911, but the ambulance was over a half an hour away. This is where I came out of the tent. Tim's wound was bleeding profusely, and he was losing blood way too quickly. His friends ended up putting him in the back of his car and speeding off to meet the ambulance halfway. Ben was also bleeding, but his wound wasn't as deep as Tim's and we were able to keep him calm until an ambulance arrived. The guys with the knives ran off into the darkness, back down to their campsite and took off in their Land Rover. My boyfriend at the time and I had gotten into his car and drove to the entrance to try and flag down the policemen on their way to the scene. Once they arrived, we were informed to stay in the car, as they had released a canine search unit to hunt down the people who stabbed our friends. By the end of the night, they had arrested the men. They had tried to flee by driving their vehicle across the lake bed, where they got stuck in a muddy section of the lake. They were on a concoction of several drugs, as suspected. Luckily, both Tim and Ben survived, although Tim had lost a lot of blood and took a few weeks to recover from his wounds. Derek and Lily had huge goose eggs, and possibly one person had a concussion, but I can't recall. It was definitely the scariest thing I have ever experienced, and a few of us had to testify against them in court. When camping became a nightmare, this is an experience I had a couple years ago. It started with my best friend and I mentioning we need to go camping again soon. We spend a lot of time outdoors, and try our best to camp at least a couple times a month. It was late November in Virginia, which can either be unseasonably warm or very cold. It was very cold this season. Our girlfriends had been recently picking at us about never taking them camping, because frankly we do a lot of primitive camping in cold, wet conditions, and we were surprised they'd even want to join us. As far as we're concerned, the harsher the conditions, the better the trip. Just your average manly ego bullshit. Honestly. I was stoked they wanted to come, so we made plans to go camping that weekend. Well, Saturday rolls around and we are all packed up and ready to get back to the great outdoors. We head onto the highway about 2.5 hours west into the mountains. As we approach our secret camping spot, it is getting colder and begins raining. I could tell my girlfriend was getting nervous about the dwindling light and setting up camp in wet conditions. My best friend and I do this frequently, so we reassure her it'll be fine. We arrive to the secret spot, which is essentially a scenic overlook that you can park beside to look at the beautiful mountains. However, by this point night has fallen, so all you can see at this point is the flickering city skyline miles into the distance. Anyone that spends time in the mountains knows that it gets dark very quickly once the sun drops behind the peaks. It is still raining and cold now. If I had a guess, I'd suspect it was about 34 degrees. The wind was violently whipping as we unpacked the car, and I could quickly see our girlfriend's demeanors deteriorating from once excited to, why did we want to come to this? To try to explain this camping spot, there is a small trail that leads off the scenic overlook that then drops vertically down a huge rock scramble, which if I had a guess is about 75 feet to the bottom of the cliff which the scenic overlook sits on top of. This is not an official marked trail, and you can sort of visualize it as somewhere that teens to park and walk down to go smoke weed. You are not allowed to camp there legally, but we were young and arrogant. We had a secret spot. It is relatively difficult to navigate your way to the bottom, and we always travel down very slowly to avoid broken ankles, falls, etc. I had all of my gear out of the car and ready to start making our way down this trail. My girlfriend and I made our way about 50 yards away from the car to the beginning of the trail. We sat down our backpacks and waited for my friend and his girlfriend. 2 to 3 minutes pass and we are wondering what is taking them so long to get their gear out of the car. Remember, it's raining and cold, so we were feeling slightly impatient. After about 5 to 10 minutes pass, I was like, alright, what the hell? Let me see what's going on. I left my girlfriend standing there and walked back over to the car. I can hear my friend and his girlfriend arguing. What's wrong? What are y'all doing? I asked. He locked the fucking keys in the car. Well, fuck. It is now almost 10 o'clock at night, freezing, raining, and we have no cell service. The nearest town is 20 miles away. Immediately I'm annoyed because if there is one thing to not do right now, it's what he just did. I walk back over to my girlfriend to let her know what's up. She suffers from a joint disorder which makes her very sore when it's cold or humid, and I can tell she's starting to wince in pain. I yelled to my friend that we're going down to get the fire set up because she's obviously uncomfortable. My main concern is getting her warm, and I'll be back up in a while to help him figure out this car situation. We turn on our headlamps and start slowly inching down this steep rocky decline. Remember, it is raining, but the worst part was the mist. It virtually renders your headlamp unusable. It illuminates all the fog around you, which makes it difficult to see. I am helping hold her gear, she'd go down, grab my gear, I'd go down, and we slowly repeated this process for about 20 minutes trying to make our way to the bottom. Even though this is a pain in the ass system, we're slowly making our way down. Again, she hands me her gear, then she comes down, takes my gear, I go further down. We're probably another 10 minutes from the bottom where we typically set up camp. What is that? She says. I could hear fear in her voice. I look down the rocky decline, squinting through the fog. I see a tarp. I said, oh hell yeah, free tarp. I figured someone at the top of the cliff had their tarp blown off and they never tried to retrieve it, so I was excited. I start inching my way over to grab the tarp, and as I'm about 5 feet from it, I see something that catches my eye. It's a handheld shopping basket from a grocery store, you know the ones. I can't make out what's in it, but it looks to be snack wrappers. I turned around and my girlfriend looked like she was gonna cry. Is that a fucking person under that tarp? I reassured her there is no way in hell. We are in the middle of nowhere. We're the only car parked up there, and it is freezing raining, and this person has no fire, no gear, tent, or anything. We are not near any major roads or trails, so there is no way it's a through hiker or homeless person out here. There are no stores, restaurants, nothing. On top of that, who could sleep on a 35-degree incline on slate stones? I inch closer to grab the tarp to snarkily prove to her she's being dramatic. My light is shining on the tarp. It moves. We both freeze like statues, and I silently stare because again my mind would not allow me to believe there could be a person sleeping on the side of this fucking hidden cliff with no gear in these conditions. It has to be the wind. My eyes must be playing tricks on me. I look back at my girlfriend, she's slowly backing up the incline. I look back down at the tarp. It starts moving. That's not wind. Someone is waking up under that fucking tarp. My heart is now pounding. I turn to my girlfriend and shakily whisper, "Run." Before I could even say that, she is hauling us scrambling up these loose falling rocks. I heard a half-awoken gravel-voiced moan, and started busting us up behind my girlfriend. I stopped as she went ahead and turned my light off and listened. I could hear that person down there shifting stones around. They were up and walking around. We woke them up. Are they going to follow us now? I tried to stay reasonable despite my fear and wondered if someone was lost or hurt down there. I called out, "Are you okay? We can help if you need help." Dead silence. "Hello." They were choosing not to respond. At that point I said fuck this, and continued up. We frantically made it up to the car and my girlfriend is in tears, freaked the fuck out for good reason. I'm pacing my mind trying to figure out what the fuck that person is doing. No gear. No shelter. No car. No fire. Once we inform our friends what happened, they're now freaking out, because we can't even get into our vehicle to leave thanks to Captain Dipshit locking his keys in it. Love you, dude. The rain has since picked up and we are sitting under a tarp huddling for warmth while my friend walks around trying to get cell service. I am sitting there dead staring the trailhead in case that person comes up. Finally my friend gets through to a locksmith. You don't even want to know what he paid for after hours recovery, but someone finally showed up. We told the locksmith what happened, and he told us to get the hell out of there and find somewhere else to camp. He'd lived in the area for a long time and then went on to tell us about the various mysterious murders that have happened over the years. Hikers missing, hikers found murdered. He said something along the lines of, "Some people hide away out here for a reason." We didn't even camp that night. Everyone was so freaked out we just drove back home. The whole car ride back was silent. I still lay awake some nights wondering what that person was doing. Were they on the run from police? Were they just a highly hardened yet unprepared camper? How did they get there with no car? Why didn't they have a fire going if they were just camping? They were just laying on the side of a cliff in the pitch black freezing rain. I wish I could truly convey the type of area we were in. This is not a place a homeless person could survive. Any person that frequents the outdoors knows that humans are a bigger threat out there than most animals. I'd always heard that, but this was the first time I believed it. It made me reflect on how many things I did wrong. I never should have taken my girlfriend there that night. Illegally camping in an unmarked area, the dark, the rain, the lack of cell service. I was confident in my own camping ability to the point I never considered an external threat like that. Had something happened, no one would have found us. I was selfish, arrogant, and naive. So much could have gone terribly wrong had that person wanted to hurt us. I don't set up camp at night anymore, and our girlfriends no longer nag us for not inviting them. We have never gone back to that spot, to the possible axe murderer sleeping under a tarp on a 35-degree incline under a rocky cliff in the dark, freezing rain. Let's not meet. Why I no longer go camping, and why I really love my dog. To understand my story, you sort of have to know a tiny bit about trespassing laws in our country, in that we don't have any so long as you're respectful and non-destructive. You can walk over any hills you like, and in my case, camp on any beach of your choosing so long as once you leave the area is how you found it. I used to love camping when I was little. Our family would go multiple times a year with a large group of my parents' friends and their kids. On average there were maybe 10 of us at a time, which was a bit of logistical challenge since we always headed out to this one really remote beach on the coast. Actually, we weren't the only ones. There are always yachts bobbing just off the shore with people in them and other campers lining up and down the beach. Most of them also had children or teenagers, so it wasn't a wild party scene. It was very much an informal family holiday spot. There was even a small building with toilets and showers installed nearby, even though this was the middle of nowhere. I guess the local council must have figured it out and got sick of people peeing behind bushes. We took a trip up in spring 2011. I'm really bad with time, but I know this because I got my dog in winter 2010, after picking her out that November from the shelter as a birthday gift from me to me, as I paid her adoption fee. Reddit. I know you love dogs and she will be very important to the story later on, so let me tell you a little bit about Parmesan. Parmesan came to me as a 6-month-old puppy who had been rescued from a dog fighting situation. We're not entirely sure what breed she is exactly, but my best guess is a Lurcher/Staffy mix. She is a wonderfully well-tempered dog with people and most dogs, but you absolutely do not threaten her. She'll have you. So by the time of this camping trip I'd had Parmesan for a few months. She'd never come camping with us before, but far as my family are concerned, dogs go on camping trips, so when we all piled into the car she came too. Unusually though, none of the family friends could make it. So it was only me, my sister, my dad and my mum. I didn't mind. I wasn't that attached to the other kids. I'd rather play with my dog and I'd still have my sister. The drive took the best part of 6 hours, and because we'd left a bit later, although I don't remember why we'd left later than normal, we arrived at sunset. Not a good time to be building a tent, but we'd expected to arrive to other campers already set up and the beach illuminated in campfires. The beach was empty. In spite of this, my parents started taking stuff out and trying to build the tent. They asked us to fetch some of the lighter bags from the boot of the car while they sat pointing a flashlight at the sand to see properly. I rolled down the window of the car for Parmesan before getting out. It was pretty hot for that time of year and I wanted her to have air. Always gotta be looking out for my furry little homie, as we're fumbling about in the dark, on a beach, in the middle of nowhere. It's pretty spooky. The one road that led to this beach was circular and had a bridge over the water, meaning you could basically circle around the beach like a big zero shape if you felt like it. I wasn't really paying any attention to the road. I was complaining I was tired, as kids are wont to do, but my mum was. After maybe 15 minutes of my dad trying to nail the tent into the sand, my mum's asking him had he seen that car drive round. It's been a few times. My dad kinda shrugged her off. He's sort of like that. I don't know if he said anything back to her, but after a few more minutes a car pulled up next to ours on the road and someone got out. It was maybe 15 or 20 feet from the cars to where we were, and the light was pretty low, except for the torches. We weren't expecting to see anyone else out here at this point, and I think my mum said it must be the security. I don't know why a random beach would have security. I think what she meant was the Wildlife Trust or something, as they do occasionally come down to do their nosy. The guy was walking pretty unevenly. He must have been drunk or high because he had that stagger to him. There was absolutely no way this guy was sober. Cool. A junkie. Not an unusual find, but it's rare to see them in the wild. As he walked into flashlight range, we realized he was carrying a large knife, maybe 15 inches. Although I was small at the time, so maybe my sense of scale was off. I don't like my dad, but credit to him, once he saw this he got up immediately, holding onto the camping mallet, and put us all behind him. The man began to shout wildly at us that we can't camp here, and he was just letting us know. My dad tried to be a bit low-key with the guy and told him that was fine, we'd leave, but this didn't work. He kept coming closer to us, so my dad started shouting and the man kept shouting back. My sister and I were crying. I remember shaking. I was utterly terrified, as I'm sure anyone would be in that situation. It really did seem like this guy and my dad were going to fight, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't fancy my dad's chances. While it's grim to consider, I'm absolutely convinced he would have killed my dad and possibly us as well once he was done, as I don't think my mother would have had the common sense to run with us. I love her, but she's always put dad and her relationship with him above us. This isn't how it went down. A bolt from the black, like a wolf descending on its prey, took us all by surprise, most of all the man with the knife. In that moment, Parmesan was the apex predator large canines represent in nature. She got him good by the arm and clamped down hard, ripping his jacket and shredding the skin underneath. He dropped the knife as it had been in the arm she had got him by. He kicked her, he punched her and eventually got her off. He grabbed the knife from the sand and ran back to his car and drove off. Parmesan didn't follow him. She stayed with us, muzzle covered in blood. Quickly as we could, we gathered our things and all got back in the car, all pretty shook up by the incident. I looked Parmy over. She was okay, but the car's window was much more open than I'd left it. We think what happened was when the shouting started, she must have put her paws up on the gap I'd left for her. As it was an old car and had the rolly down windows and not an electric button, we think she must have been able to hit it with her paws to force it down enough to squeeze out. This is not the end of my story. We were all pretty scared, and since we had the dog with us, we couldn't book into a hotel for the night. My parents decided just to drive home so we could all feel safe, but first had to drive into the nearest town for petrol as they were kind of low. I spent the time trying to clean Parmesan up a little. I'd always loved dogs, but what she'd just done for me blew my mind. As we drove into town, we came across a petrol station, but it looked closed. My dad drove up closer to get a better look and stuck his head out the window to get a better look at the sign. My mom asked him what on earth he was doing, and he told her he was trying to see when it opens. Never. My heart fucking sank. Parked in the corner, behind a van so we hadn't seen him at first, was the man with the knife. He was sitting on the bonnet of his car, using some tissue paper to clean up his arm. It looked pretty bad. Without stopping to refuel or look anywhere else in town, my dad drove right out of there. He decided to go to the next town over, but this was remove. The next town over was 60 miles away. He didn't have that much petrol, we realized, as we began driving. We were going to break down. That's fine, Dad said, we had AA cover. They'd come tow us home, or at least to somewhere acceptable for the night. Better than staying in the last town. After driving for maybe 5 minutes, lights flash us from behind. Another car. The same car the man had been driving. It was him, following us. He must have realized we were low on petrol. The next half hour was one of the worst half hours of my life. I had a complete and utter breakdown, as did everyone really. I could tell my parents were trying to keep it under wraps so it wouldn't upset us, but we weren't really little kids. We were both double digits. We knew how dangerous this situation was. Dad turned off the radio to conserve petrol, and the man followed us for 55 miles before he peeled away onto another road. Our fuel meter was on the big red E for empty for the last 10 miles. We were driving on fumes. I don't really believe in God, but if he does exist, that was definitely one of his miracles. Once we got there, we drove into a petrol station and refilled to a full tank before driving the rest of the way home. Sister and I slept in the car after that. I only woke up once we made it all the way home, just grateful nothing worse had happened than that. After getting some sleep, my mom phoned the non-emergency line for the police and reported what had happened. They never got back to her after that, but apparently the woman she spoke to said they may wish to in the future, as he matched the description given of a suspect wanted in relation to a murder charge. No idea if he actually was that guy or just a random psycho. As I said, they never got back to her, so what's the takeaway then? Other than crazy man on the beach, let's not meet. Well, for me it's that I love Parmesan. She's still with us now, old as the hills and twice as grizzled as one of my mom's friends likes to joke. I don't know why she did what she did that day. I couldn't tell you what her thought process was.